What's going on, guys? Welcome to another video. And in this video, I'm gonna break down the infantry battalion for you guys. Let's just jump right into it. All right. So before we break down the infantry battalion, well, what is the infantry battalion? What do they do, right? So they are the primary unit for ground combat operations for the Marines, right? And the infantry battalion is part of a larger entity called the regiment. And the regiment is going to have 4 infantry battalions that are their subunits, right? So when they're like, hey, the regiment's going to go to war or whatever, then all the units go with it, all the subunits, right? The 4 infantry battalions. And each infantry battalion is going to have about anywhere between 800 to 1,000 Marines. Each company is going to have about anywhere between 180 to 220 Marines, depending on the company. Each company is going to have their 3 platoons, and each platoon is going to have 40 to 50 Marines or so, and each company is going to have a staff that makes sure each of the platoons are doing what they're supposed to be doing, and each company is going to have a captain, O3, a first sergeant, E8, and a senior first lieutenant, O2. The MOS is going to be a O3, O2 infantry officer. The infantry battalion is going to have 3 of those companies, and then they're going to have a weapons company, and the weapons company is going to be comprised of like your snipers, your heavy guns, all the Gucci stuff are going to be in the weapons company. So if you want to be like a sniper or something, you're going to have to go get training, and then you'll be part of the weapons platoon, or weapons company, and they're going to do a variety of like special operations and stuff like that. They're not just going to be like the infantry guys, the infantry companies. All right, but these companies, for the most part, operate the same. What really makes the difference, and where kind of like where the sausage making happens, it's in the H&S company, and we'll jump into that. So the H&S company, this is going to be where like administratively all of the other entities, officers are going to be a part of, right? The commanding officer, which is going to be your O5 lieutenant colonel, is going to be spearheading the entire battalion, but he falls under H&S, and that's just the structure how they do it. But the commanding officer is at the top of the entire battalion. To his right, he's going to have his sergeant major. His sergeant major is going to be an E9, and he's going to be the senior enlisted leader or advisor to the commanding officer. Not only is he going to be for the commanding officer, but for all the other staff sergeants, gunnery sergeants, and everybody. All the enlisted are going to go to should be going to the sergeant major for advice, counselings, issues, anything in that nature. It's going to be handled by the sergeant major for the enlisted side, and possibly the officer side too, right? Like sometimes it is what it is. You're also going to have your O4 major, right? O4 rank major executive officer, who's going to be the left hand of the commanding officer, who is going to do the exact same thing for the most part for as the sergeant major for the CO, but on the officer side. He's going to be making sure that the officers are doing what they're supposed to be doing, the executives officers. He's going to be their mentor. He's going to be the advisor for not only the commanding officer, but for the officers in the battalion, from O1, O2, O3, and potentially even the other O4 who's at the operations side. But like I said, commanding officer, right hand sergeant major, left hand executive officer, O4, E9, O5. At the regiment, you're going to have your O6 colonel, Fulbert. So coming down from there, we're going to have our H&S company, right? The H&S company is going to have a captain, who's going to be most likely a O302 infantry officer, who's not going to know how to handle his H&S staff in any way, shape, or form, because these guys are all, for the most part, come out pretty arrogant. They think they know their shit. They think they're hot stuff, but they don't really know how administratively all these sections work, how they operate, what goes into the operations in these sections, and they're just going to try to like force their way into this. And really what an infantry officer as an H&S company commander should do is take a step back, learn from his junior officers that are in these sections, like S1, S2, S3, maybe not S3, S4, supply and communications, and understand what their roles are and how he can be a supporting entity to them, right? Because for ultimately he's supposed to be the HNS company's like first tier before they go to the XO in regards to issues with Marines, issues with their personal life, and all that stuff, right? The shitty thing is that for the most part, the company commander of HNS company doesn't. None of these officers report to him. He's just kind of like there. And what I mean by that is that your S1 officer, your S uh, not your S4, but your S6 and your supply officers are all going to report to the XO directly. And the executive officer, the O4 XO, is going to do their fitness reports, their counselings, and all this stuff for them. The commanding officer, the company commander, the captain, doesn't really do much of that. He does none of that at all. For the most part, he's just making sure that the training is getting coordinated, the Marines are getting their trainings done, their record keeping, all that stuff. They're coordinating the hikes, all pretty much administrative for the Marines in general. That team that is going to be again that captain, that first sergeant, and the executive officer, which is going to be the senior first lieutenant. And that MOS is also going to be an 0302 infantry officer. So whenever like a new lieutenant, new infantry officer comes in, he goes to the company, infantry company, and the senior first lieutenant usually gets moved to the executive officer position in one of the companies. And that's usually how it works. So they kind of just you move up the ranks in the positions for the most part as the infantry officer. Now let's jump into S1, which is going to be your first section of H&S company. So the S1 section, what are they really doing? Well, they're going to handle your defense travel system, all the travel, the per diem, whenever Marines go out of town, whenever Marines are going on leave, emergency leave, administrative leave, whenever a Marine gets hurt or whenever a Marine gets into legal trouble, when somebody needs to route any kind of paperwork to the commanding officer, they're going to handle all of that. And it's a very heavy section, and it's usually going to get spearheaded by a second lieutenant or first lieutenant, and it's going to have a chief that's going to be their staff sergeant or gunnery sergeant that is going to help make sure all this runs smoothly. And a total of about 67 Marines, maybe 8, but for the most part, it's about 10 Marines total in the S1 section, administrative section, and the officer is going to hold the MOS of 0102. So that is usually going to be the first duty station for that. The S1 officer is also going to be the coffee maker for the commanding officer. He's going to be like that dude's executive assistant. And that's really what you are as an 0102. You're the executive assistant for the commanding officer. You're pretty much his bitch. Let's be real. The adjutant is the commanding officer's bitch. All right, enough of the S1. Let's jump over to the S2. All right, so the S2 section. Hold on. Now we're getting into actual cool tactical stuff. Let me throw this back on. The S2 section is actually be spearheaded by a captain, not a second lieutenant or first lieutenant. It's going to be a captain there, 03. And then he's going to have a S2 Alpha, which is going to be a second lieutenant or a first lieutenant. For the most part, it's usually the second lieutenant, the very junior guy coming straight out of the schoolhouse, the basic school, and their MOS training straight there. And the team is going to be comprised of about 5 Marines, maybe a sergeant, not really E6 or staff sergeant or gunner sergeant. It's usually be like junior Marines for the most part, the 2 officers. And what do? They don't do shit. If you want the easy job, go there. Go Intel. S2 is your Intel section, and they don't really do shit. All right, I lied. They do some stuff, okay? They print maps. That's what they do. When the infantry guys need maps for the terrain, they need maps for the operations, for the training, they go to the S2 section. The S2 prints these out for them. And if you need like a security clearance and you need something on your security clearance, they do that stuff too. They'll sign your little checkout or check-in form. But that's pretty much it. They don't really do much, right? Pretty skate job. That's all I gotta say about the S2. Might hurt somebody's feelings, but fuck them. All right, next we're gonna jump to your S3. And your S3, there are definitely gonna be some heavy hitters in there. It's gonna be your major operations officer 0302. It's gonna be your S3 Alpha, which is also going to be an 0302 billet, and it's usually be a captain or a very senior first lieutenant, but most likely a captain. You're also going to have your master sergeant there. He's going to be an E8, and he's going to be the advisor, same thing, the chief to the major, the operations officer. And he's also going to serve as a liaison for like the trainings and coordinating like field operations on the base with the ranges, all that good stuff. And he's going to work hand in hand with your gunner on the infantry battalion. The gunner is going to be the bombs and the warrant officer on this side, and make sure we have the ammunition, make sure we have our ranges locked down, make sure we have the equipment available and all that stuff for the training and the field operations that these infantry guys are going to do. Now, that entire team is also it's gonna be comprised of like, you know, like 8 Marines, nothing too crazy. They're gonna have your training Marines that are gonna, you know, all the paperwork, all the McTim stuff, coordinating the ranges. They're also gonna have a CBRN officer, which is your chemical, biological, radiological, and nuclear officer, and he's gonna make sure you got your gas training coordinated, cam suits, and all the suits available for you guys, the boots, the suits, the gas masks. They're gonna make sure that you guys have all that stuff, and it's properly serviced, and they issue it out to you guys as, you know, Marines come in and out of the unit. So they manage all that stuff. And the S3 is gonna make sure that the training is conducted, you know, for the battalion, and the not only conducted, but planned out and scheduled for the entire year prior to a deployment. So they're going to make sure that the commanding officer is and the whole battalion is on trajectory to make sure they do their MCRE, which is their Marine Corps Combat Readiness Evaluation, by higher headquarters, by the division, to make sure that the infantry battalion is ready for deployment, combat operations, contingency operations, and all that stuff. So they're going to do the major schedule for the battalion. Let's jump into the S4. The S4 section is going to be one of your bigger sections from HNS Company, your headquarters and service company, and it's going to be spearheaded by 0402 Captain, which is going to be your S4, and 0402 First Lieutenant. It's going to be your S4 Alpha, and a Motor T Officer, which is going to be a 0402, and a Maintenance Management Officer, which is also going to be an 0402. So if you are a junior second lieutenant with a MOS of 0402, you're probably going to end up in one of these 3 billets in the infantry battalion. That's probably going to be one of your first duty stations, and you're probably going to get shafted and go to the maintenance management section. So let's start from the bottom up, right? The maintenance management section, which is going to be the most junior lieutenant, is going to be making sure that the maintenance, with 2 Marines, by the way, I think you only get about 2 Marines still. You're going to make sure that the battalion's maintenance is being conducted properly. The other maintenance sections are placing their parts on order. If they're not, they're identifying those deficiencies. You're going to make sure that the documentation of all the maintenance equipment is properly documented, and you're going to brief the commanding officer on his equipment every week. Your life is kind of going to suck, but lean on your supply officer, and he will make sure that your life is okay. If he's a good supply officer, if he's not, your life is probably going to suck along with his. Okay. Then you're going to have your Motor T Officer, again, 0402 Logistics Officer, and he's going to have his platoon of operators for vehicles, his maintenance guys, maintenance clerks as well, you know, maintenance. And he's usually going to have a staff sergeant or a gunnery sergeant, 2 of them in his section as his chiefs, to advise him, mentor him, develop him, guide him, help him make decisions, make sure that the junior Marines are ready, squared away. And this platoon is usually going to have anywhere between like 30 to 40 Marines probably, for the most part. And then your S4 Alpha is going to be this, you know, more senior first lieutenant, and he's going to be in charge of really the administrative side of the S4 office. And they're going to have like the embark guys, they're going to have the training guys, and it's usually about 6 or 7 Marines in the office. But the S4 is usually comprised of about a total of like 50, 60 Marines, okay? Then, real quick, their embark guys, they also make sure like transportation, embarking on ships, like that's their jobs. Doing all that stuff is also, you know, part of that job there in the S4 section. Let's jump over to the supply section. The supply section, the best section, is going to be spearheaded by a second lieutenant or first lieutenant, 3002 billet. Okay, MOS, Marine Occupational Specialty, 3002, not to get confused with 0302 because 3002 is way better. And he is going to be the commanding officer's third hand. Okay, so I said the executive officer and the sergeant major are his right and left hand. The suppo, the supply officer, is going to be the freaking commanding officer's third hand man. He's going to be the property manager of equipment and furniture, build everything, buildings, and all that stuff. And he's also going to be his accountant, which is very freaking important. He's going to make sure that he plans his budget, he reconciles it with the operations section, all the other sections. The commanding officer has to sign off on his budget. He's going to handle the commanding officer's money. He's going to make sure he spends it properly, that the companies have what they need to function efficiently, train efficiently, operate efficiently. He's also going to make sure that our records are freaking squared away, that the Marines are they're receiving equipment properly, that we're keeping records of all our stuff, that we pass inspections. Because if you fuck up the money, you fuck up the weapons, or lose something that's freaking critical, your ass is on the line. You will get shit canned so fast, like the commanding officer wouldn't blink twice. And then the commanding officer is also going to get fucking shit canned by his boss. So it's a high critical billet. You are special staff officer to the commanding officer, and you report to the executive officer and the commanding officer directly. If you, as a supply officer, suck at your job, then you're most likely going to report to the S4 officer, because you're going to need extra oversight, and the S4 officer is going to be pissed at you for that. So as that supply section, you're making sure that you're issuing equipment, that you're receiving the equipment, that you're ordering it, that you're tracking it. You're making sure that it's going to arrive. If it doesn't arrive, you do all the actions to make sure you get your replacement parts, that you get your money back for all these parts that you ordered. So a big slew of things, okay? And that's pretty much it for the supply section. So again, you're going to have a second lieutenant, first lieutenant, or first lieutenant, so either or, and a staff sergeant who's going to be your chief, or very senior sergeant who's very close to picking up staff sergeant. At very rare cases, you'll have a gunnery sergeant, and that is comprised of your supply section. So those two guys plus 10 or 13 Marines, anywhere between that category or that section. Back then, prior to about 2024, supply had two different MOSs, right? 3051s and 3043s. Now they've combined those MOSs, so now there's only one MOS for the enlisted guys in supply, and they do both jobs, warehousing and the administrative section, which is your requisitioning, your accounting, your budgeting, and all that stuff. So property management, and that's just still usually about 10 to 12 Marines. You're gonna, before it was like 5 and 5 or 6 and 6 split, but now it's just going to be all combined. So that is supply for you guys. Let's jump into your S5 section. And what is S5 section? Well, I'm about to tell you that section. It is your urinalysis section, right? This is going to be your staff sergeant, the shittiest staff sergeant in the battalion, that is going to hold his job because he fucking sucks, most likely, and the command doesn't like him, and they fucking hate him. And so he's doing urinalysis for the battalion. Literally every month, he will draft up the quotas, all randomized, and he will take piss samples from all the Marines whose names show up on whatever day that they're pulling names that day or that week or that month. And he will take their piss samples, get them sent away. They'll come back. The results will come back. Anybody that failed their drug tests get freaking administratively separated, legal action against them. But that's your S5. Literally your one staff NCO who sucks dick. They don't like him, and they gave him an extra billet. All right, let's jump over to the S6 section. One of the other biggest sections in the H&S company, headquarters and service company. And that's going to be spearheaded by second lieutenant or first lieutenant. A master sergeant who's going to be the chief, which is an E8, and about 2 or 3 staff sergeants, depending on which on where you're at. But for the most part, it's going to be 2 staff sergeants and several sergeants, but a bunch of junior Marines, and they're gonna be your like radio operators. They're gonna be your maintenance guys. So you're usually gonna have like a operations staff sergeant. You're gonna have a maintenance staff sergeant. Your master sergeant is gonna be above them, making sure that everything's running smoothly, that your equipment's accounted for properly, that your equipment freaking works. You're gonna have your vehicle operators as well, because your vehicles are gonna have communications equipment. You're probably going to issue Marines out to other companies for their communications equipment. And yeah, you are also special staff officer to the executive officer, the commanding officer, and you're going to make sure that the companies have what they need in regards to communications equipment. So, lastly, we're going to jump. That is your S6 section for the most part. Lastly, we are going to jump into the chaplain. And really, the chaplain, he's just there to serve as a counselor, guidance counselor, pretty much a therapist for junior Marines. Like if they need anything, like he's there. He also reports to commanding officer. But that is it. Your HNS company is going to be comprised of all these sections that are going to work really freaking hard to support the infantry companies, your weapons company, and ensure that they are successful for operations. They are geared for operations, that they have the equipment, that they have the supplies, that they have the transportation, that they have their freaking maintenance, that they have their maintenance parts, that they have their supply parts, that they have the personnel. And that is your guys' job. S1 through the chaplain through S6, they're going to make sure they're going to work together as a team to make sure that these guys are supported to the front for the front lines, right? And that, guys, is your infantry battalion breakdown. Hope you enjoyed the video. Hope that gave you guys some insight. If you want to know more, if you got any questions, throw them down below. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff if you want.